će biti jednog dana, kao što je moja sada, da ćete dočekati i starost i unučad i sve vam želim najbolje.
Ovdje sam u jevrejskoj općini za vrijeme rata radio u kuhinji, pomagao sam ljudima da prežive, hranili su se i ja sam im pomagao. Oni su isto i samim svojim prisustvom i meni su pomagali. Ovdje su okolo padale granate, mi smo bježali od granata, sakrivali se, bilo je svakako, bilo je teško. Međutim, evo, ostali smo živi, sve dobro će da bude i nemojte ništa da se brinete, bit će i vama dobro i bit će sve u redu.
Prije nego što će početi rat, osjećao se da će se nešto veliko desiti. Ja sam pratio informativne emisije, novine. Međutim, nisam mogao predvidjeti šta će to da se desi i bili smo iznenađeni svi kad je počeo da se puca u Sarajevu. Onda smo izgubili glavu i počeli da razmišljamo šta ćemo s djecom. Ja sam imao sreću da sam bio član jevrejske zajednice i u Sarajevu i da sam svoju djecu uspio poslati kod rođaka na Krku, tako da sam prestao da brinem za porodicu i za djecu i dobio sam slobodno vrijeme i upitao sam se šta ja mogu da uradim. To je najvažnije pitanje koje možete sebi da postavite. I odlučio sam da dođem u jevrejsku opštinu, da pomažem drugima. Prvo sam počeo da radim pošto sam sistem menadžer za računare. Na računaru sam pravio spiskove i raspored putovanja konvojima kojima ljudi odlaze iz Sarajeva. Najzanimljivije je bilo organizovati putovanje konvoja i dobavka hrane i lijekova koji su članovi jevrejske zajednice iz svijeta, to je prevoz sa aerodroma putem uz pomoć UNPROFOR-a koji je pratio naš kamion. Treba da nađete mjesto u tom haosu i da se družite sa ljudima koji imaju istu namjeru kao i vi, pa da postignete svoj mir. Ja vam želim svu sreću.
Nisam htjela da napuštam, da izlazim, da budem izbjeglica pored svog grada i svojih prijatelja i komšija. Ostala sam u Sarajevu. Bila sam angažovana u jevrejskoj opštini, u kuhinji, poslove kuhanja, pomaganja izbjeglicama. Jer bilo je izbjeglica koji su od ovih područja planinski se spustili radi granatiranja. Bilo je veoma teško. Bježanje u sklonište, granatiranje. Izgubila sam dosta prijatelja i članova porodice, ali eto, završio se i taj rat. Preživjela sam, a to želim i vama, prijateljima u Ukrajini. Nadajte se boljoj budućnosti, jer sam ja doživjela.
Prije nekih 50 godina sam bio u vašoj zemlji i gledao očima dječaka koji je vidio ogromna prostranstva, ogroman Kijev i svu tu ljepotu. Mislite da će život vas da biti takav? Ne bude. Ružne stvari se u životu dešavaju ne pitajući. Kad se to desilo u mom gradu, nisam bio mlad kao vi, završio sam biomedicinski fakultet, imao snove, imao ambicije, imao sve što imate vi. Neću vam pričati o tome kako je bilo ovdje, ne želim se sjećati. Ali ono čega se volim sjetiti, na što sam jako ponosan, to je da je to zlo iz mene izvuklo ono najbolje. Bilo je nevjerovatno. Nas je u medicinskom timu bilo 5. Sa 29 godina me je dopalo da budem šef medicinskog tima. Možete misliti lika koji je tek završio fakultet, zna nešto malo iz knjiga, treba da ide u kućne posjete, jer smo shvatili da je to način kako pomoći ljudima. Nas 5 smo to radili 4 godine s nevjerovatnim entuzijazmom, ponosom. Vjerovatno u nekim momentima bi mi i prešli granicu onog što bi, da kažem, u nekim normalnim okolnostima se radilo u kućnoj posjeti, ali okolnosti su bile takve. To me je naučilo da ne prekinem sanjat, da ne prestanem davat najbolje od sebe. Jer nada je dobra stvar, možda najbolja od svih. Da se nikad ne prekinete nadat, zlo će biti proći. Nikad ono ne traje vječno. Doduše, nekih vaših prijatelja neće biti ko što nema ni mojih. Ali ostalo je ovo da smo pomogli u jednom momentu koliko smo mogli, izvukli najbolje iz sebe i ostalo je to da me je naučilo da se ne predam, da idem dalje, da uvijek može bolje i više. Želim vam svako dobro. Sve bude i prođe. Zlo također. Samo naprijed, vi to možete.
U mračnim vremenima koja su pred vama, ponekad ćete izgubiti vjeru i savladat će vas umor. Ali ja sada vama pišem iz budućnosti i ja vam kažem, vi ćete pobijediti kao što smo i mi. Ja sam trebala biti mrtva, ali sam evo preživjela. I sutra idem da izvedem unuke u šetnju. I vi ćete tako jednog dana, jer u vama vidim isti onaj otpor koji sam vidjela ovdje. Za sada vam šaljem ono najdragocijenije što imam. To je moj slogan, malo izmijenjen za vas. Ukrajina će biti, sve drugo će proći. Slava Ukrajini. Sarajevo.
Que sos, Padre Rahman, mandamos al pastor Neman, que no sea el buen Simán. Nos y a todos Israel.
Glory to Jesus Christ. Hello, we are happy to welcome you at the conference organized by the Institute of Ecumenical Studies of the Ukrainian Catholic University and the Commission for Interdenomination and Interreligious Relations with the support of the RENOVABIS Foundation. The conference entitled Overcoming Together the Horrors of War, Experience of Post-Yugoslav States and Ukraine. And I would like to suggest that we start our conference with a prayer, because even now, in being in the state of war, we are feeling this breath of war in our cities, in particular in Chernihiv, where several missiles hit the center of the city, and we know about 14 people killed and more than 60 injured in the city. So we will start it with a prayer, our Father prayer for just peace in the Balkans, in Ukraine, and all over the world. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. In the name of Father, and Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you. Today, we will hold our conference in 2 languages.
І ті, які присутні у залі,
And
ми вас
those
просимо
present in the
взяти
room, please take the headsets if you need the interpretation into Ukrainian, because we will have speeches both in English and in Ukrainian. Those who are listening to us online, you will be able to listen to the interpretation by choosing a globe button at the bottom of your screen. So why did we decide to hold this conference? A couple of years ago, the Commission on Interfaith and Interreligious Relations, headed by Father Chaban, was conducting a very interesting conference on the experience of reconciliation between the Germans and the Poles. And in the process of this reconciliation, a significant role was played by the religious figures. And therefore, the idea of holding a conference like that was in the air for a long time. So we decided to focus on the Balkan countries, the countries which lived through armed conflict, and each of these countries has its own experience of this conflict. And despite the fact that the war is over, the outcomes of this war are still felt right now. So it would be very interesting now to have a look at the experience of post-Yugoslavia countries, to see how they lived through the war and how the countries and the societies managed to heal the wounds and work with the borders that were broken inside the societies, what they succeeded in and what they did not succeed in. So it would be very interesting to look at that also from the perspective of the Ukrainian experience. We will be talking a lot about solidarity, because when you are in trouble, it's much easier and much more productive when we join our efforts in this situation, not when we need to do it on our own. So that's why sharing the experience, speaking about what we managed to do or what we failed in, will help us go through these difficult times together. To begin this conference, I would like to thank the RENOVABIS charity organization, which supported our initiatives, and also what concerns the technical matters. We start by the words of welcome. Our next part will be the research conference, and your questions and answers we will be able to answer them. If you're in the room here, we will approach you with a microphone. If you're listening to us online, please write the questions in the chat, and the moderator will read it to the speakers. What concerns the security and safety issues, since Ukraine is at war, if we hear an air raid alert, if we have a serious threat of a missile attack, we will ask our conference guests who are present here in the room to go down into the bomb shelter, but I think we will manage to continue there. And my last technical remark, I would like to ask those people who have not registered yet at the entrance to this room to do so after the conference. So thank you very much. And we are now proceeding to the official opening of the conference. And we have here the head of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, his Beatitude Sviatoslav Shevchuk. Thank you for joining our conference, and we are waiting for your welcoming word. Glory to Jesus Christ. I hope that you can hear me well. Father Ivan, I can see you in one of those windows. Dr. Rector, well, dear sisters and brothers, dear participants of today's conference, war is always a tragedy. War is always a crime, especially when somebody is conducting the war and saying they are doing that in the name of God. That's blasphemy. But we believe that war never has this last word. The war will end one day. We may have a long war, but it will be over one day. The experience of this war is unique, but I think that we Ukrainians who are now living through this very difficult experience of war, for us it's very important to understand that we have not been abandoned, that we are not face to face with our pain and with our tragedy. And therefore, the topic of this conference for us sounds very optimistic and very relevant, together through the horrors of war. Obviously, the experience of suffering, the experience of the war and healing of the wounds of war is always life-giving. So I would like to thank everyone who joined this conference today to share the experience they have lived through. And I would like to thank the Ukrainian Catholic University and especially the Institute of Ecumenical Studies and also the Commission of our Curia dealing with the interfaith and interreligious dialogue for organizing this conference. Today, it's very important for us to listen about the experience of the tragedy of war of the Balkan nations and Balkan countries. Almost 30 years have passed since then, and talking to your brothers from Croatia, from Bosnia and Herzegovina, from Montenegro, and other Balkan countries, we feel how painful this war still is. We feel the wounds of war which our brothers and sisters from different denominations and different churches have, and how your experience, the experience of the war you lived through, the experience of victory over the war itself is very important. And therefore, I would like to wholeheartedly thank all the participants of this conference who will be sharing this experience, who will be courageous enough to share their pain, the one they experienced and the why they still have for right now. We know that it may be very difficult to speak about one's own experience, because when you speak about the war you have witnessed, about a personal tragedy you experienced, you seem to live through it once again. But this division, this sharing of the experience of pain may have a therapeutic, a curing effect. So I would like to thank everyone who will be speaking at this conference today. This is a very complicated topic, but these people are courageous enough to speak about it openly. We all are facing a very important task. We have to heal the wounds of war. We all believe that Ukraine will prevail, and sooner or later, a fair and just peace will come to our lands. We believe not only into the victory over the Russian aggression, but we believe into the victory over the war itself, over the reasons which actually caused the war in the post-Soviet space. And then the Ukrainian churches, just as the churches of the Balkan countries, will have a special mission to heal the wounds of war, to reconcile those who used to fight, to build our joint future. We do understand the experience of churches is very important here, because healing the wounds of war without their Christian understanding and comprehension is very complicated. And I think that this process will be just simply impossible. And what is more, even today, talking to our combatants and civilians who have witnessed the tragedy of war and serving here in Kyiv, Kyiv is a city which was almost in a siege, and the suburbs of Kyiv were liberated. So since then, we've had our own very specific experience of war. And we understand that reconciling people and healing the wounds of war is a very complicated and a long process. We understand that we have to heal not the ideas, we have to reconcile not just our ways of thinking, but we have to heal the hearts. And this is the process which we, the Christians, believe is impossible without the Holy Spirit. Because the Holy Spirit, this is the God's power of love, which eliminates hatred. This is the power which helps rebuild the relations. Sin and war, they destroy the relations between people, and the Holy Spirit, in the communion, helps us restore this ability to communicate and to be together. So today I would like to call the Holy Spirit and the grace of the Holy Spirit on all of us. So let us all have the strength to go through the horrors of war together, the war which is experienced by Ukraine, and let us have enough strength to do whatever we can to prevent the war from spreading to other parts of the world. It seems like the whole world is now suspended in this expectation of a global conflict, especially after Iran attacked Israel. The world seems to be in the expectation of a new global conflict. So let us use the grace of the Holy Spirit to prevent this, because I believe that today the people can prevent war. They can do anything for this destructive force not to spread to other parts of the world. Together, we will survive through the horrors of war. We will prevail over the war. We will heal the wounds of the war. And together, we will achieve the fair and just peace for all people. Because as Martin Luther King Jr. said once, if there's one person, one nation who's suffering unjustly, then there's no justice for everyone else. That means suffering for everyone. So let God bless us, and I hope this conference brings good fruit, and we hope the suffering will end, and the peace and grace will come upon us. Thank you. Glory to Jesus Christ. We can say Amen, let it be so, and thank you for the inspiring words, and we would like to thank the whole Greek Catholic Church in your person, and also to all the Ukrainian churches which are doing a lot to heal the hearts of the people. There's still a lot of work to do, but together we can do it more effectively and more efficiently. Our conference is being held on the premises of the theological faculty of the Ukrainian Catholic University. So I would like to give the floor to Dr. Taras Dobko, the rector of the Ukrainian Catholic University. Thank you for supporting this conference, but also for all other projects on peace building and healing the wounds of war, which are implemented by the university. Thank you, Father Roman. Your Beatitude, Svetoslav, dear brothers and sisters, glory to Jesus Christ. First of all, I would like to welcome you all at this international conference on behalf of our academic community. This conference is really important for the process of peace building, and I would like to thank the co-organizers of the conference, the Institute of Ecumenical Studies of the Ukrainian Catholic University, and the UGCC Commission for Interreligious Dialogue and Ecumenical Affairs. And I would like to thank the RENOVABIS Foundation for its support of this conference, and also for the many years of support of our church and our university. And a special gratitude, of course, goes to the participants of this conference, those from Croatia, Bosnia, Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Montenegro. And I hope that the Balkan experience of overcoming the outcomes of war will help us react to those challenges which were provoked by the outrageous Russian invasion into Ukraine. In the beginning of 1990s, when I was 20 years old and when I still was a student, the war in the Balkans was not in the center of my attention, and I'm ashamed to say that, but even if there were some objective reasons for that, because we didn't have internet at that time and many other events were happening in Ukraine at that time, and there were many challenges for a young person at that moment, but the truth is, we also were very busy with our own business. We lacked the global consciousness, so to say, and we lacked the global responsibility. And I think that the Great War in Ukraine has changed a lot. It has changed not only our lives, but also Ukrainians' way of thinking. For example, my formula of Ukrainian victory includes not only the restoration of the territorial integrity of our country, not only the punishment for the war criminals and reparations from the Russian Federation for all the damages inflicted, not only the return of our refugees, not only the healing of wounds, but also our active solidarity with those countries and those nations who will need a similar support one day, the support which we require now. And the Ukrainian experience of the horrors of war is not unique, although it's very valuable, but there's a lot of hatred and cynicism in the world. And we actually can once again stress how shocked we were when Iran inflicted the strike on Israel.
And this conference is not our first attempt at cooperation of our university with our Balkan partners in times of war, because recently the Ukrainian Catholic University has been part of resocialization of Ukrainian veterans project, which is implemented by Unbroken Ukrainian Foundation and Nero Adriatic. And this is part of this smaller project, but reintegration becomes the focus of attention. It is very important to reintegrate veterans into civil lives, and also just about their physical and mental rehabilitation. Last year in Croatia, there was a pilot project, and a month ago, a second phase was launched under the framework of this program. Ukrainian volunteers, they were trained of diving as one of the tools for rehabilitation. 10 combatants were participants, and the Ukrainian Catholic University is responsible for the educational part of the project. This is conducting studies for development of guidelines. Thanks to these guidelines, Ukrainian veterans in the future could also become diving instructors, and they can also share this unique experience in Ukraine. 2 weeks ago, I went to southern part of Ukraine. I've been to the cities of Mykolaiv and Odessa, and I really wanted to feel these cities and the communities of these cities. I met 3 different groups. These were representatives of religious world, also Croatian activists and locals, and one of the outcomes was that different cities are traumatized in a different way, and that means that will take different approaches for their restoring and for healing. Of course, we cannot follow the principle of one size fits all if we really don't want to have further division, which is very important if to speak about the challenges to our solidarity that we already have. That is why the backbone for these processes has to be the feeling of hope and our capacity to make a difference. All those categories, well, educational facilities, public organizations, church, they could really become the source for the hope and for being self-sufficient. I believe that through concerted effort of our churches, religious educational institutions, also NGOs, that will be possible for us to speak to the hearts of our people, and we will help them to understand and to really feel that God is very close, and that it's possible to remain a human being even when you undergo very difficult situations and challenges in your life, and that also good will prevail. I also wish all of you to have fruitful cooperation at the conference. Thank you. Father, thank you for this word of hope. And we understand that hope is a key concept. This is something what really helps Ukrainians the most in these very difficult times. But I think that the president of the UCU Institute of Ecumenical Studies, Reverend Dr. Ivan Datsko, knows a lot about hope, because actually there was no Ukraine as an independent state when he already worked with these matters. He was a father, he was very close to Joseph Slipay. It's over to you, Reverend. Glory to Jesus Christ. I would like to welcome all the fathers, bishops, the rector. It is in English, my welcoming words, because it is very important that our guests from other countries were able to understand what I'm saying. That is why I would like to apologize in advance for my English, but it's very important for me to do it in English.
I wish to thank our Lord that despite the war in which Ukraine finds itself today, our Institute of Ecumenical Studies, together with the Commission for Interreligious Dialogue and Ecumenical Affairs of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church and the Department for Pastoral Theology of our university, within the Faculty of Philosophy and Theology, can organize this conference. Naturally, we owe our special thanks to the RENOVABIS Foundation in Germany for its generous financial support. When I was still a student of theology in the 1960s and 70s, the theological faculty of the University of Innsbruck in Austria had about 770 students, 100 of whom are not just diocesan priests or Jesuit fathers, but also of religious orders and lay people, about 100 of whom came from Croatia, Slovenia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, Vojvodina, Montenegro, Macedonia, and Serbia. With many of these students, I have been in contact throughout these years, even until today, especially with Bishop Franjo Komarica, who was retired recently. These contacts have been most precious, especially when communism fell in the 1990s, and shortly after, the brutal war broke out in what was then known as Yugoslavia. Today, we are in a similar situation in Ukraine. We already thought that after regaining our independence, we will be able to live in full freedom and democracy. However, the situation changed drastically in 2014 with the illegal annexation of Crimea in that year, and particularly after the 24th of February 2022, with the fully fledged war of Russia against Ukraine. I am very grateful to my co-workers that we are organizing this conference. I welcome our friends from these places where this war took place 30 years ago. The prime aim of this conference is precisely for our friends from these countries, which I mentioned just a few moments ago, and other parts of former Yugoslavia, to share how they experienced and got along during that war, and how they coped with its consequences throughout these recent years. Have they been capable of releasing the wounds, of taking care of the wounds of war, and whether they are able to reconcile oneself with another after this war? Because all these experiences will follow our nation and our church. Beyond doubt, such sharing of experience is of paramount importance, not just for Ukrainians, but as his Beatitude said, for the entire mankind itself. Such topics as building a just peace, post-Yugoslav versus Ukrainian experience of reconciliation, very important. Building a just peace, the role of churches and civil society, the healing of the wounds of war, not just physical, but psychological, reconciliation from the perspective of time, lessons for Ukraine and others, which are most invaluable for all of us, especially today in Ukraine. In fact, we are looking forward to your presentations and especially discussions. I do encourage discussions, which we will be experiencing throughout these 2 days. And after its successful conclusion, I just want to anticipate our institute is willing to organize similar conferences in the future. I think we'll do something about the situation in Ireland, Northern Ireland, Republic of Ireland, Great Britain. It is different, of course, but when I was a student, and before that, Ireland was a sort of a indication for us Ukrainians how to proceed. So I wish you all success, and may the Holy Spirit bless our souls, hearts, and minds in this important task and work. Thank you. Слава Ісусу Христу.
Дякую, отче Іване, за ваше привітальне слово.
Thank you, Father. That's cool. Right now, I would like to invite Reverend Mikhailo Lesev, head of the Department of the Pastoral Theology at the UCU Philosophy and Theology faculty. Glory to Jesus Christ, His Beatitude, Rector of the Ukrainian Catholic University, dear participants and guests of the conference, on behalf of the Department for Pastoral Theology of the Ukrainian Catholic University, would like to welcome all of you at this event, which is of great importance in the context of us striving to build sustainable peace and reconciliation. Several months ago, our department had a similar meeting, and this is a continuation for us of sharing Ukrainian and Balkan experience. We had a meeting with representatives of different Croatian religious and educational institutions. Also, this conference that we are participating in today brings together the experience of post-Yugoslav countries and Ukraine in overcoming the horrors of war. This is not only a platform for us to share some lessons from the past, but this is also a platform for us to build the foundation for our shared future. We live in times when cooperation and a mutual understanding between peoples, between states, gains its momentum. Ultimately, Europe is a symbol of joint values, shared values, and this is something which is deeply rooted historically in Christian traditions. Peace, grace, justice are part and parcel of it, and those who are trying to violate this peace and breach these values, which were part of what Creator had for us, they are trying to ruin this world. I would like to express gratitude to all the participants who are ready to participate in the conference, because us working on these values, this is not a static process, this is an extremely dynamic process from pastoral viewpoint. Also, I would like to know that on the one hand, it is such a valuable experience for us to learn more about post-Yugoslav countries, all of them, but at the same time we are ready to share the experience which we have gained, and this is the experience of us having a very close contact with God in times of war. Roman Lozinski, who is a Ukrainian soldier, wrote that very often those people who never pray, they pray for the first time at the front line, and they believe in God, but they have different ways of seeing God. And also, Bishop Vasily from Kharkiv says that the Kharkiv board of churches, where we have all religious communities represented apart from the Russian church, started organizing and coordinating all humanitarian projects in the region. This is an extremely tough situation, but it brought all of us together, and it is actually have ecumenism, works in practice. I wish this conference to become not only the analysis of the past, but it is about our foresight and the future. Our discussions, our recommendations, they really have to contribute to building peace not only in Ukraine and in this region. It is very important that they contribute to shaping of our joint future as based on Christian and general human values. Let God help us with this. Thank you. And last but not least is Reverend Dr. Ihor Shaban, who is the head of the UGCC Commission for Interreligious Dialogue and Ecumenical Affairs. Thank you for this joint effort that you have in terms of bringing together not only religious communities but also different representatives of society, because this is the experience of healing human hearts. This is what your commission does together with our institute, both in Ukraine and beyond Ukraine. Over to you. Yes, I'm not going to take up a lot of your time because we are very curious to learn from our guests, his beatitude, reverence, participants of the conference. I would like to welcome all of you at this joint conference. I'm extremely grateful to all of you who decided to come here to participate in the event organized by the uh, Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church. I know that we really had very positive feedback in the beginning, but it seems to me that fear prevailed, and not everyone who in the beginning volunteered to come here from Balkan states, they decided not to come. But we are so grateful to those who made it, and thank you for sharing your experience. And we will have an opportunity to listen to you. We will have a dialogue, we will have discussions, but in the first part we are ready to listen to you, to understand what you had been through, to learn more about your experience. Before the conference started, I really asked what would be the right word for naming what happened 30 years ago. Was it a conflict? Was it war? Or maybe there's a different word which I have to use. And I heard the answer that it was war, because it is something which is in between the conflict and genocide. That is why I think that this is something which is also pertinent to us, because we are trying to find this term, these words which would be apt in this situation to name what has been happening here. That is why we stand ready to hear you out. We welcome you to have a discussion. And first of all, I would like to pass the floor to the moderator of the first part of the conference, Ms. Katerina Shemkevich, who is the head of the Analytical Center for Balkan Studies. She is also a professor at Zagreb University, and she is joining us online. Do we have Katerina with us? Yes, I am with you. It's over to you. I would like to welcome everyone. I would like to express gratitude to the organizer of the Ukrainian Catholic University for this great event that you organized. But in the beginning, I would like to address some words to our guests from Balkan states, and I would like to speak in the language which became almost my native language, but I'm not going to take up too much of your time.
I will not continue. I thanked our guests, and I will repeat once again. I've been researching war crimes for many years, and the process of reconciliation on the territory of the former Yugoslavia. I presented my dissertation on the topic, which is directly connected with the war in Ukraine right now. The topic is the role of international and non-governmental organizations in overcoming the outcomes of the war crimes on the territories of the former Yugoslavia. The topic wasn't very popular in the academic circles when I was a young postgraduate student back in 2008. I was a postgrad student in Zaporizhia at that time, and I could not even guess that. Later on, I will be in times of the Russian aggression in Ukraine. I will be told how topical this dissertation is, and I would have never thought that I would be sharing my experience with my colleagues, with the panel participants, speaking about what the former Yugoslavia countries experienced and how precious their experience is for the Ukrainian society and the Ukrainian state right now. The wars in Yugoslavia started in 1991 and ended in 2001. It was a long decade. These were the wars caused by various factors, internal factors and external factors. These were the wars not only in Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina. These were the wars on the territory of Kosovo, on the territory of the Northern Macedonia, the present Northern Macedonia, and so on. All these wars were characterized by the interreligious and interethnic clashes and the genocide, war crimes. Many people went missing, and the results of these war crimes, of these interethnic wars, are being felt by the former Yugoslavia countries even right now. Starting from 1992 or 1993, non-governmental organizations and activists in Croatia, in Bosnia, in Montenegro, and Macedonia, they all did very important job, but they documented war crimes. Later on, this job was very important in the post-war period when the NGOs proceeded to the next stage of their work. This was peaceful activism, and I think Warren will tell us more about it. And they were raising the awareness of the society about all those horrific things happening during the wars. And they were working with the past to overcome the traumas. And at the moment, the process is still underway. So it's been almost 30 years since the war ended in Bosnia, Herzegovina, and Croatia, a little less in Bosnia and Northern Macedonia. But nevertheless, people still experience post-war traumas from the beginning of 1990s. There is still division in the society. There still exist separate schools for if we speak, for example, the Albanian minority and Macedonian population in some regions of Bosnia and Herzegovina. There are different school programs for children, but still there are some attempts to tell the truth to the people and to the world, because the world is gradually forgetting about what happened in the former Yugoslavia, but we shouldn't forget about it. We have to speak about it, and we should use this experience of the former Yugoslavian countries, which they are now sharing with Ukraine. But looking into their experience, we have to remember some things. We have to learn from it, but not copy it, because there were inter-ethnic and interreligious wars there, but the situation in Ukraine is very different. We don't have a civil war here. We don't have an inter-ethnic clash. We have a different component which was present on the territory of the former Yugoslavia. We have an aggression on the part of a neighboring state, the Russian Federation, and we have war crimes. So we have to study their experience, but studying their experience, we have to remember about our own specifics, because it defines the further process of reconciliation. There will be reconciliation, but it will be working in different areas. We shouldn't be afraid of condemning some things, and we have to follow the example of resilience of the Bosnians, who, despite all the suffering they lived through in 1990s, they keep talking about the truth and sharing the truth about genocide, about rapes, about mass executions, and they have been speaking about it for many years. So we have to learn from the experience of the legal matters. We have to make pressure. We have to make pressure on the global community, explaining that the Russia started a war of aggression. They violated the Convention on Genocide. They are destroying and exterminating Ukrainians. Unfortunately, Bosnia and Herzegovina and Croatia, when they filed the case at the International Court, they lost the cases on genocide and the crimes of aggression. We have their experience, which we can use to make sure that our truth is spread around the world, and so that we can fight for our truth. Thank you. And now let us proceed to the panel discussion itself. So I would like to give the floor to a person about whom I learned when I was writing my dissertation. So this is Dr. Goran Bozicevic, the director of Miramida Center, located in Istria. And they are involved into activism, and he is one of the best representatives of the peace building sector, and his experience in this area may be probably the most valuable for Ukraine. So Goran, the floor is yours.
My region, that would be that really women were and are the real peace builders. I'm talking about post-Yugoslav region. So as I learned that, I really want to ask my colleague Tanya from Bosnia and Herzegovina, would you like, after all us men at the beginning and Katarina's short introduction, to take a floor and open this panel? Okay, but I simply want to raise that issue of the role of the women in post-war situation. When I was asked to come here, I was last time in Ukraine 2020, in Kiev. In that time, my book was published on Ukrainian building of dialogue by friends from Duh and Litera. I think it's problem with two microphones then. No, I'm fine. I can stand up actually.
No, you can stand. Yeah. We'll take this out. No problem.
Is it okay?
Yes. Або це.
Yeah.
Yeah, він його виключить.
May I switch off your microphone?
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay. It was difficult to prepare this speech, and actually I wanted to, and then I decided that these difficulties is not coming just from nowhere, that it has some deep grounds and reasons. So I have small task for you. Maybe not now because this is conference, not workshop, but maybe when you come home today. Imagine that year is 2050. That you are asked to come to country which is experiencing very heavy destruction and war. And you are asked to tell them about your experience in Ukraine in 2020s. What would you tell them? I would say this is kind of questions we need to ask ourselves. What I'm talking about need for reflection. Another lesson from my peace work is that in last 30 years, we who were involved, many of us in our region, in building a peace, we did lots of reflection. What I mean by that? When I was coming on invitation of Mennonites office in Zaporizhia from 2013, almost every year after that, and invited by some other friends from Kiev, Tatiana, Svetlana, and others, I usually would start my training sessions with these words. Actually question, what is difference between you and me? And some of them would say, like, you have experience, you have knowledge, such kind of things to be expected. But actually, my point was difference is that I'm doing mistakes for 25 years. And you just started doing mistakes. I would say in this field of peace building, we need to make mistakes almost on daily level. So the problem is not to make mistake. Problem is what we do after that. If we learn out of them, we grow. We do not do harm, and our society, our community benefits. Well, I made lots of mistakes in these 30 years, and I guess I learned something. I'm asking myself, what is my role today here? I didn't want to deliver lecture. I don't feel like I need to tell you something important which you don't know. But basically, simply, I wanted to share experience how it is now, 30 years after war in my country. And today is important day in my country. The parliamentary elections today. And I'm on one of the lists, which doesn't mean that I want to go to parliament. I don't want. But I want to support forces who wants to bring us out of the rhetoric, out of narrative, out of imposed, really, structures of war. We still live in war in 90s. So if you would ask me what are elections in Croatia at the moment, I would say basically there are about two narratives. One is about nation, about our big victory, about need to be united, about almost we are all one, all kind of things we were hearing in 90s during the war. But no real challenge of 21st century is addressed by them. And there are new generations of people who wants to talk about climate change. They want to talk why many people are leaving Croatia. We have hundreds of thousands of young people, educated, wanted to work, knowing foreign languages, wanted to learn, who are going to Ireland, to Germany, to other countries. And one may say usually critique is they are going because of the money. And because I'm coming from the Catholic, let's say, state, not wrong to say that, I would quote one Catholic agency who did survey in Germany asking people why you left Croatia. Not first, neither second, because of the money. Answer was, I wasn't respected. There was too much corruption. I learned hard, I worked hard, I wanted to get a job, and then I didn't get a job. My country is not respecting me, then I will go somewhere else. So what am I talking? I'm talking really about two concepts which I learned. I was lucky to work with Quakers. Quakers are one of traditional Christian peace churches. And I met Adam Curl, who is father of the peace studies, old Quaker, and I became, well, his fan, not to say student, but good friend. And he's talking about peace building is about relationship building. Another friend, Professor Lisa Shirk from United States, in one sentence say peace building is about cooperation. So what am I talking? If we are all the one, what kind of relationship do we have? Actually, we don't have, because we are one. What kind of cooperation we could have? We don't have, because we are one. What I mean by one, it's like family with two little children. You don't discuss with children of 2 years or 3 years decision-making process, because they are really infants. But when they grow up, we need to talk with each other. We need to resolve issues. There is great documentary from Serbia, from Vojvodina. I may remember the name, maybe some of my colleagues would. About Ron Haviv, American war photographer, exhibition of photos. And my friends in Vojvodina, part of the Serbia, were in late 90s, posed that exhibition in Novi Sad in Serbia. It was Milosevic time. And public was very angry because there were many war photographers, many war crimes there, but by purpose they didn't put the description of the photos. They simply wanted to show it to public, and they put blank papers so that audience could write on that. Why am I saying you to that? Because I still remember the sentence of one citizen of Novi Sad, one woman saying, how war came to Yugoslavia. We didn't have conflict for 45 years and now war. So this is kind of answer. If in any relationship, if in any community, if in any society, we don't have conflict, or if we claim that we don't have conflict, then we have big problem. Because healthy society is society with many conflicts, not dealing with them with violence. But here in this room, there is maybe 50 of us. One may say we are all one. In a way, what is linking us together is wish to be today here. But to be honest, I cannot go beyond that statement. We are different individuals, different histories, different worldviews, different political views, different genders, all kinds of differences. And I'm now making difference between Croatia in 90s and Croatia in 2020. I could support my government. The name was the Government of National Unity during the war because we needed that. But in 2020, I am not really happy that we now need government of national unity because our country is at the bottom of all lists of European Union. So what I'm saying is that what I learned is that during the war, we are not only fighting enemy, whoever the enemy is. We are building ourselves and we are building relationship with people who are important to us. We are building our communities and our societies. The better we do it, the bigger wish, bigger motivation to defend it we have. If it is structures and society with lots of bad politicians, incompetent politicians, misogynist people who are lying, who are stealing, what is my motivation to fight for them? And I will stop now because I didn't come here to lecture anything. What I may imagine that you ask me what is situation now in our region. I did not in Croatia, but in Kosovo, Serbia, and Macedonia, evaluation of big European Union funded 4 years project supporting civilian war victims, 20 years after, even more. But in Kosovo, it's about 20 years after. And if you ask me how are they today, they are not good. They're forgotten. Politicians try to escape them. Eventually, once a year, come to make photo with them. They don't have funding. Many of them didn't find their dearest ones. I kept, because I was interviewing some 40 people, I was hearing sentences like, you know, my dad was taken 20 years ago, but today, if someone is ringing on the door and I don't know who it is, my first reaction is maybe it's him. And that is what is war about 20 years after. So I really wish that war in Ukraine stops today. I really wish that all the killing stops today. What I want to say, this is the end of the fighting. But moving out of the war is a long process. So what we could do now is what we were doing during the war, learning, meeting people, preserving space for peace, preserving space for nonviolence. I like to stress the concept of nonviolence here, however inappropriate it may sound to you. I started with my colleagues the same age, we are all over 60. Institution, not non-governmental organization, but institution, politics of nonviolence. If it would be 6 years ago, people would laugh at us. Like, Croatian Gandhis, good, you are peace activists, but don't mess it with politics. Then we did survey for local elections 3 years ago. And we asked on 400 mail addresses, let's say people, small survey, what do you think about nonviolence, politics of nonviolence? Can it come together? 100 people responded, 25%. We had several workshops across to Croatia, including mayors of big towns, who were openly told us, we came because of curiosity. How can you connect nonviolence and politics? And we stayed on workshop all day because it makes sense, because of 3 reasons in that time. One reason was the COVID pandemic, which showed that really many things, but one thing is that we need to cooperate with each other when big danger comes, and that world can change almost in a minute. The second one is climate changes, where we slowly learn that we will need to cooperate with people we don't like. If it is about surviving, I'm not going to explore each of person, tell me about your views, so I will decide, will I save, I don't know, my village, my city with you? I have to rely on you. And third one is that people in Croatia are sick of violence in politics. Luckily, it's not really physical violence, but it's violent language, it's all kind of discriminations, it's all kind of hate speech, and you can stand it for a year, you can stand it for 5 years, maybe you can stand it for 10 years, but after 20 years, it's too much. You don't want your kids to live in that environment. I will slowly, or less slowly, finish. With maybe 2 things. Journalists used to ask me what I mean about Croatian victory, because Croatia is one of the few countries who claims that won the war in Balkans. All other situations a bit more complex. We are proud on our victory. And I said, it depends what we were fighting for, who we were fighting. I would assume we were fighting at some point, and I'll make it simple, Serbian fascism. And I said, then we come to answer. If focus is on fascism, then we could claim we are victors, we could be proud. What I'm afraid is that in my society, focus was slightly more on Serbian. It's better to be a fascist than a Serb. And that's big danger in thinking. It's huge, huge difference. So I would say if we were fighting fascism, let's do it. Let's do it together with our neighbors, Serbs, because that's bad thing. That's attack on life. But if we are fighting someone because of ethnicity, then we have a problem. I don't want to live in that kind of society. And talking, you may wonder, I mentioned small spaces of peace. Why is important to preserve? When Russian aggression, and I intentionally avoided for a long time world war. I said it's not war in Ukraine, it's Russian aggression on Ukraine. Let's talk what really is happening. Happened. We were so shocked. Post-traumatic stress disorder was everywhere in Croatia, but also I know in Bosnia because I worked there. People were just, all bad emotions were coming out of the people. And I had some workshops in that time with people where I live in Istria, northern part of the coast, close to Slovenia and Italy. And one woman asked me, tell me what to do. My husband comes every day from the work. He opens television and radio, and we are listening news from Ukraine every day. From when he comes home till the end, he doesn't speak to us. He's just completely not present with us, and from day to day it happens, and we are really, I don't know what to do. And then we spoke and we told, go to him and say, I love you. Kids love you. We need you. So please, if informations are important, decide what is your time. Maybe half an hour now, maybe half an hour at 8 o'clock or 9, but be with us the rest of the time. We need you really. Let's not war come to our homes. And then I forgot on that. And I met her week after. She was so happy. She said, yes, it helped a lot. We talk, we have family atmosphere at home. So I would say that that's what we could do who are not directly involved. But I would say also you who are here in situation which every foreigner would claim that we understand, how are you? I heard that for years. Oh, Goran, you know, it's tough. But no one knows really how you feel. I could have some idea because I was in similar situation, but not in the same. So I would say, preserve time for yourself, look after yourself. You are needed for peace, you are needed for your country, and we all need you. And I would say these human resources for peace are the most important ones. Дякую.
Дякую, Горане. Я думаю, що всі питання.
Thank you, Goran, and I think that all the questions and further discussions we will have after all speakers present their ideas for us to have a complete picture, and then we will have a discussion. I would like to invite Yuri Sharko, who is the Dean of the Philosophy and Theology faculty at the Ukrainian Catholic University. Glory to Jesus Christ.
I guess it's more convenient for our guests. To talk about Ukraine's experience in the middle of the hot phase of the war is not easy, since we continue to face the threat of elimination, and many more objective conclusions will come later from the distance of time. However, the solution to the problem has several apparent components. Before I present some of my consideration, I want to confirm that the postmodern Western world must recognize that there is evil in the world. Yes, it's not a superstition. There is evil in the world, disgusting, brutal, and scary. It appears that it is difficult for a person living in the postmodern world to understand that statement, but ignoring this fact is an even more dangerous practice. Nicholas Thomas Wright, in his book Evil and the Justice of God, argues that problems arise when, first, we ignore evil when it doesn't hit us in the face. Second, we are surprised by evil when it does. Third, we react in immature and dangerous way as a result. Thus, the problem of postmodernity is as follows. If anyone has their truth and no one is guilty of anything, moral dignity and responsibility disappear. It was said, however, that the postmodern world, or even post-postmodern world, ended in Ukraine on the 24th of February 2022, because we Ukrainians know what and who is good and how look like evil. This war that Russia started in Ukraine has several reasons. You may call it aggression, but I guess it's a war. And to begin listing these reasons, let me quote our Ukrainian dissident Miroslav Marinovich, who says that unpunished and unredeemed evil does not disappear. After the end of the Second World War, the civilized world condemned Nazism in Nuremberg. But there was no Nuremberg for Russia and its genocidal regime, which organized ethnical cleansing, deportation to Siberia, organization of concentration camps, and a couple of times genocide by hunger in Ukraine. During our conference on the need for new thinking in Catholic social teaching due to the war in Ukraine, which took place in February, Dr. Yuri Pidlisny presented some examples of how Russia, being defeated in the Cold War, again wasn't punished and later occupied Transnistria, Abkhazia, Chechnya, parts of Georgia, and Ukraine. The categories of hybrid war and propaganda which Russia actively uses today still are not critically and adequately explained in the social teaching of the Catholic Church. I am not talking about channels like Russia Today. Such examples are apparent and can be seen. I mean Russian studies at almost every prominent Western university. Russian cultural centers were and still are places where spies recruited naive admirers of the big Russian culture. Russian culture was presented as a culture of the highest level, neglecting at the same time and eliminating less promoted cultures. And it's okay. Many people earn their PhD degrees on these studies, which were completely based on propaganda. Second, we didn't hear apologies from the Russian Orthodox Church for cooperation with the communist totalitarian regime until now. Liquidation of Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church and other crimes. Instead of this, we received the situation where Russian Orthodox Church started to work on the renewal of the Russian Empire, which resulted in the genocidal ideology of the Russian world. That doctrine of the Russian world is a big challenge for Christian identity, primarily since Eastern spirituality has been associated with Russian Orthodoxy for quite an extended period. The danger of the ethnophilitism and pseudo-messianism of Russia's unique role in the world history is still not seen nor demasked by intellectuals in the West. These ideas resulted in the genocidal concept of the Russian world. The strange silence of many Christian churches on the role of the Russian Orthodox Church as the ideological propagator of the war is a reality that smells very bad. On March 27, the so-called World Russian People's Council, headed by the head of the Russian Orthodox Church, Patriarch Kirill of Moscow, issued an order to the Russian people in which the war in Ukraine is called holy and the territories of Ukraine are declared to be within the zone of exclusive influence of Russia. Unfortunately, we don't hear many reactions from the official representatives of the Catholic Church, for example. Third, today, a huge problem is that the West has no plan to defeat Putin's totalitarian regime. People are helping us, but they do not have a plan for defeating Russia. In his interview for New Voice, Ukrainian historian Professor Yaroslav Hertzak states, the West does not even think about it. That is the biggest challenge, and we always say, you must have a strategy to defeat Russia. They have a strategy to prevent Ukraine from losing, but there is no strategy for Russia to lose. Moreover, they are even afraid to think about it. Hertzak says that Western leaders of the older generation were formed in the conditions of the Cold War. The primary strategy of the Cold War was the deterrence of the opponent. The same thing they believe should be done about the war between Russia and Ukraine, just to restrain Russia. But this means that the war will continue for many years and there will be no victory. We find ourselves relatively in limbo for many years, neither victory nor defeat. Do what you want, and under the victory understand just peace for Ukraine. On February 23, 2024, the Ukrainian service BBC republishes the article from the Straits Times. It's a magazine and website in Singapore, where correspondent Jonathan Elisle affirms that the problem of the West during the war in Ukraine is that they are late for everything. What I mean? At first, the Europeans and Americans did not want to give Ukraine artillery, but over time they relented. Then they were against the supply of tanks, but in the end they declared that they would do this as well. They denied Ukrainian airplanes, but now they are training Ukrainian pilots. The expert notes that all the weapon systems needed by Ukraine eventually appeared, but often only after the opportunity to change the battlefield situation was lost. The same we have in our days when Tripilla was destroyed because we didn't have a missile to prevent the attack. Fourth, the role of the Church. In my humble opinion, the Catholic Church as a part of Western society must still increase its moral voice to correctly evaluate current threats. Although the Catholic Church in the West is part of Western society, the Church cannot keep waiting because that costs the lives of Ukrainians. Look at the biblical tradition. What do we see there? The prophets Nathan, Elijah, Amos, Hosea, Jeremiah, John the Baptist, and Jesus himself dared to speak the truth to the powerful of this world. Nathan reprimanded David for taking a wife from Uriah the Hittite and sending him to certain death to get rid of his rival. Elijah bravely chastised King Ahab and Queen Jezebel for idolatry, and they tried to kill him. John the Baptist told Herod that it was not fit for him to have his brother's wife as his wife. Jesus calls Herod a fox and refuses to speak to him when he is brought to trial. The world needs to hear the prophetic, crystal clear voice of the Church and its official representatives, who dare to call modern heroes by name and rebuke false prophets for distorting God's truth, a voice that calls by their names evil and good. We often hear about the importance of leaving room for negotiations, which is why we observe the symmetrical approach for the Holy See to military conflicts and even wars. This practice is justified when it comes to two Christian countries or nations, and that situation we had during the First World War, where Christians were killing each other. However, many years of silence on the activities of the Russian Orthodox Church as a servant of the totalitarian regime in Russia led to the fact that this community created a genocidal ideology of the Russian world, which the Russian state began to implement very zealously. We must reconsider the principle of impartiality before moral and value choices. Some call it a symmetrical approach, but the victim and aggressor cannot be estimated similarly. We also observe the unofficial and long-lasting church diplomacy, what we call Ostpolitik, which is very painful for Ukrainians and Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church. It is a secular approach and not that of the gospel. Describing the Russian war in Ukraine and its reaction to it, Timothy Snyder, American historian, often speaks about moral weakness. According to Snyder, for many people to admit the genocide of Ukrainians by Russians means to intervene. This is why many honorable persons among Western politicians prefer to keep diplomatic silence. Rabbi Dissenyi, whose homeland was brutally attacked by Hamas in the same style as Russia do in Ukraine, in his speech at the Gregorian University in Rome, it was in January 2024, a couple months ago, affirmed that today we have a theological regress on the issue of peace. Why he said this? Our theological decadence allowed criminal Russia to look like an advocate of Christian values, while in modern Russia, books of Russian theologians from abroad were widely burned. I mean representative of the Paris School of Theology like Schmemann or Meindorf. I will not mention many. That guy was completely forbidden. You often hear from honored church spokespeople that the war is always failure for all. But it's not valid. The war should be a failure only for the aggressor and not for the victim country that defends the God-given dignity of its citizens. We have lawful defense, and our aim just peace. We don't want to fight. And in our case, we are not experiencing failure. Failure has experienced aggressor. And we cannot be symmetrically estimated because we are victim. Romantic Russia and its great culture no longer exist. Why? That society lives by the desire to eliminate Ukrainians. Look at sociology. Look at the result of the last election in Russia, and you will see. Fifth, we still observe that I would call double standards. when profit prevails over values and principle in business. What I mean? Unfortunately, many Western companies that are speaking about politics of respect for the people's dignity still work in Russia, paying taxes and in this way unintentionally, I hope, helping to kill Ukrainians. They support Russian economy that they were able to fight and continue aggression in Ukraine. 6. Values matter and have their price. This is what our generation have to admit once more. Without values, humanity will reach destruction because the law of the jungle and the law of the force will prevail. We either recognize this and act accordingly or disappear as civilization. From the commandments on Sinai to the Sermon on the Mount of Jesus, quite a long way passed, and at the same time a complex evolution of the human spirit took place. A step back to the time before Sinai, to the time without elementary justice, this is the modern offer of the humanized Russia to the world. Ukraine, as we see for the last 2 years, did not accept this proposal. Also, everyone around us said we would stick to our convictions for just a few days. We have shown that values matter but always come at a high price. Our testimony today is an invitation to follow all people of goodwill. The response to this invitation is different, but certainly not the one that is needed today. The world needs to hear the what is our role and the what is our role and challenge to be human, to have rights, and to call ourselves human? The answer is obvious: to be people of values. This is the lesson and witness Ukraine gives to the world and the church today. And instead of conclusion, I would say a couple final remarks. During a conference in Munich in February, I was talking about the naiveness of pacifism, which is dangerous for the Christian worldview. I was asked by Ambassador Tombinsky, do we have a crisis of Christian ethics, and if so, then why? My answer was as follows. The crisis of Christian ethics has a mutual character rooted in the Enlightenment and the Church communication with the world. From one side, due to acute secularism, God, so to say, was put in the private sphere of life. But the other side of the problem is that the Church often wants to be modern in inappropriate way. The aforementioned impartiality during the Russian invasion in Ukraine, Ostpolitik and Realpolitik confirm that our voice is weak and not convincing, and we are losing moral authority. Unfortunately, history repeats. Many Christians in the West still hope the war will pass by. We live in a strange situation where after 2000 years of Christianity, Christians' virtues are not glasses through which we courageously look at modern moral challenges of our times. We have rights and must defend ourselves. What is our aim? And just peace is a goal of lawful defense. Why do we defend ourselves? Short answer: it is our God-given right. In other words, this war is about values. As Christians, we should be ready to give very prompt and proper answers to the moral challenges of our times. One of the most important answers to the brutal Russian invasion of Ukraine should be the effective social teaching of the Church for establishing just peace in Ukraine with a due answer to the challenges of Russian propaganda. Thank you very much for your attention.
Дякую, отче. Да, і я
Thank you, Father. Just a short comment. I would like to say that the war in Ukraine actually caused the Serbian Orthodox Church reconsider its views, and it's not only in Serbia but in the Balkan region in general, because the position of the Serbian Orthodox Church, which is in close contact with the Russian Orthodox Church, is being reconsidered right now. The impact of the Russian Orthodox Church was very big, but lately the Serbian Orthodox Church just started realizing, and also the journalists and many people started realizing that the Serbian Church is sharing the Russian disinformation and the propaganda, and is having a very significant impact on many fields of life and walks of life in the former Yugoslavia. And now I would like to give the floor to the director of the Post-Conflict Research Center in Sarajevo, and as I can judge from her biography, a person who is an expert in transitional justice, human rights, a person who knows a lot about civil development, non-governmental organizations, and the role of these organizations in development of the post-war society in a country where the brutal war was raging. So this is Tatiana Milovanovic from Sarajevo, once again, a director of the Post-Conflict Research Center. So the floor is yours.
Me speak as well today. It's been a long day and week for the Balkan people that have been traveling, and I'm sorry if I get a little bit tired in my voice as I talk. It's a very humbling experience to be here with all of you, and it's a big also sadness that this is my first time visiting Ukraine, and then only after the aggression started and after your country has started going through these horrors, we were able to realize that we have a lot more in common. But that, I guess, is just a thing that happens with history. We have to learn, we have to live through things to then learn and then to connect and then to find humanity and connections between us. I don't know if that's a women thing or if that's my relative youth thing. Try to be very concrete in some of the messages that I'm sending over, as I try to stay away from too much philosophical way of thinking. So I'll try my best to convey some lessons learned from the Bosnian context as someone who's been working within the civil society sector for over 15 years, too many years now. And why both Goran and I come from the civil society or non-governmental sector is really because people like us have been at the forefront of leading the, however you want to call it, peace building, reconciliation, transitional justice processes. And as much as that is a useful starting point, it isn't the perfect one, because that also means that not much has been done from our governments, and also not much has been done from our religious leaders as well. And it is evident very much in the fact that, from my understanding, the organizers have tried but have not been able to get any religious representatives from Bosnia and Herzegovina, for example. And that should tell you a little bit about that. Unfortunately, in our region, and especially in my country, religion has been very politicized to a point where it's very difficult to find, in a way, courageous religious leaders who've been at the forefront of what we consider building peace. Rather, they've been at the forefront of building divisions. So a couple of things I'll try to speak in a way of, this is what we did, this is what we would suggest you not to do because of reasons. Now, whether as you go along in your, well, first this fight to stop the war, and then in your fight for development of for further development of your nation and statehood, whether you'll listen or not, that history will show, and time will show. But I always like to say that maybe Bosnia is not a great example for many things, but one thing that we can serve as an example is of sometimes how not to do things. I'd like to start with thinking of thinking that not obviously a war and aggression will stop. One day will stop. I hope that you, as a society and as individuals and as communities, are going to be able to take time to reflect on how would you like it to end. And that's a big privilege to be able to think it through. When my country was going through war, ordinary citizens had very little to say in how we want our country to be after the war. Our wars and genocide were ended by a peace agreement, but the peace agreement that was created by international community with 3-4 men in the room. No any women in the room, no any other minority, religious or other. So our ordinary people had very little to say in how they want Bosnia to be. And it's becoming more and more evident now, as we are 30 years later, that we've gotten ourselves into a bit of trouble because we've created a society that is still very much divided along these ethnic lines, and that as much as it tries and it pushes, it keeps stumbling across these ethnic lines instead of finding ways to cherish the ethnic diversity in our country and community. Another point is to also think of, and as you go along in your fight for peace and later fight for maintaining peace, there's going to be a huge group of people who will not be, to sort of say, direct victims of war, meaning they are not people who have bodily harm, physical harm done to them, who just lived through the war and horrors of it. And those, hopefully, will be the majority of your citizens. Don't forget them. I was born in 1994, meaning that I don't remember the war. I remember it through the testimonies, through judgments, through narratives of my parents. And there was a very clear feeling, as my parents were not direct victims of the war, thank God. But after the war, they survived it. They were in the country the whole time, and they were fighting for their lives, right? And after the war, they had a feeling of being completely left alone. They went through a huge traumatic experience together with their family, together with their community. And unfortunately, afterwards, our country, our state, did not give them any social, psychosocial, health, development support. So after being in a state of war for over 4 years, how to then keep being a person, how to keep living, how to give birth to your children, how to bring up those children in a way that is perspective, in a way that is peaceful, in a way that gives future to those children. And that's why today some 30 years after the war, we have many new generations of young people who also don't believe that they have the future in Bosnia, because they've been brought up by these parents who didn't see a lot of support in their own society. So don't forget about them as well. And another point is, and first of all, thank you so much, Goran, for trying to give me a word earlier as the woman of the panel, but is the role of women in your society. In, I would say, 90% of conflicts in the world, women are victims. First and foremost, are perceived as victims. And in Bosnian society, did not stay away from that. When we talk about women, first and foremost, victims. And that is a terrible narrative to build, because you're taking away the agency that women have in your society. And I hope you understand that they do. If it wasn't for women in Bosnian society, and in this case, if it wasn't for mothers, and in more specifically, if it wasn't for the mothers of Srebrenica in this case, and in case you're not aware why mothers of Srebrenica, we've our country also, especially the Bosniak people of my country, survived genocide during the 90s. And out of that suffering, and out of over 8,000 men killed, were left mothers of Srebrenica. And they became one of the most powerful movements of women in the Western Balkans. And thanks to them, today you have this, in a way, institution called the ICMP, which is the International Commission for Missing Persons. And from what I know, they're here as well, trying to help your society, Ukrainian society, to find missing persons. And thanks to innovatively their work, there's a special DNA analysis for actually matching the remains of missing people to their families. Thanks to the mothers of Srebrenica, we've had a great number of cases in front of the International Criminal Tribunal for former Yugoslavia, and thanks to very brave testimonies of the women who survived rape in different concentration camps, but especially in a small place called Foča in Bosnia. Rape is actually a crime against humanity for the whole world. So don't forget to give agency when agency is given, and don't forget the voices of women. Don't always start from this kind of protective way. Your women already have the agency. It's not only about protecting them and thinking of them as victims. So give them agency to take role in building your society and in fighting for the peace and in fighting for sustaining your peace. And in that relation, because I'm trying not to talk too much, I've brought a little video that I will ask colleagues to share. But before they do, I want to tell you why I'm sharing it. Specifically, next year is 30 years since Srebrenica genocide was committed in my country. And this video will give you some visuals of this, but more importantly, at the end of this month or beginning of next, so very soon, in a few weeks, there will be a big vote in the UN General Assembly on the Srebrenica resolution. It is after some, I think, over 10 years since the last vote we tried to have, and basically this resolution is supposed to, among other things, declare July 11th as the global day of remembrance of Srebrenica genocide, and also it is supposed to sort of officially, if it has not been clear so far, but proclaim that genocide in Srebrenica did happen. And so another thing I want to tell you, and we're still fighting for this recognition. It's been 30 years, and I'm not telling you this to depress you, but I'm trying to tell it in a way that the fight you're fighting today, you're gonna have to fight it for many years to come, and it will really never stop. It will just transform. So as you go along your peace building path or your in your fight for freedom, it will never stop. It will transform as you grow as a society. So I truly hope that you're ready to take it on, and also that you're ready to then transform this fight to your new generations. So I hope that you'll, I don't know if it's enjoy the correct word, but I hope that you'll enjoy the video, and thank you very much. Hvala.
This is the place where some 5,000 to 6,000 people came on July 11th, 1995, seeking refuge, and were literally handed over to the Serbs by Dutch battalion 2 days later in the early evening, late afternoon of July 13th.
15 puta u Tuzlu išla u memorijalni centar, dok sam svoga sina i svoga muža istraživala. 15 puta. Sve koščicu po koščicu. I opet nisam ukopala sve. Da Bog da, sine, da vi ne dočekate ovo što smo mi dočekali.
Now, what the memorial does is, let's be honest, initially and for quite a long time, the memorial was really about burying the victims of July 95. And the definition of success was finding a few bones somewhere in the woods, or had, other people finding it and then identifying this handful of bones and burying them here. That was the definition of success, believe it or not.
Svud sam, sine, lutala. Svud sam po svijetu lutala. Ali nisam mira našla dok nisam došla svojoj kući. Kad sam došla svojoj kući, svaku je veći moj sin i moj muž s menom. Oni meni usno dođu, ja kad se prenim, njih nema.
Now, the center itself is now at a sort of a transitioning stage where we're trying to establish a proper memorial that has archive, research capacities, that is capable of commemorating the loss of not only July 1995. July 1995 came on the heels of a gruesome and grueling 3.5-year-long siege that took thousands of lives as well. And I don't believe that those victims are any less worthy than the victims of July 1995. And I'll do my best to rectify the perception in the outside world that there is somehow a difference between these two groups.
Дякую всім виступаючим. Я трошки
Thank you. I would like to explain a little bit about Srebrenica. It is a very traumatic moment for Bosnia, and this is what we heard just now, that they've been waiting for 30 days for this day to be declared an international day of commemoration of victims of genocide in Srebrenica. This is the only case when international justice managed to prove that in Srebrenica, protected by the US, suffered from genocide. Or there were some other cases provided by NGOs, and investigators dealt with that during international tribunal, and Bosnian Serbia committed genocide also in other regions of Bosnia in 1992-1995, but it was only Srebrenica case which was proved at an international level, and it is recognized as genocide. It is very important for this resolution that Jana mentioned is adopted, and I hope that it is adopted. But right now we have some discussions still, and from yesterday's news I could see that there are many countries which joined the process of drafting of the resolution, which will be voted for in early May of this year or at the end of April. And Ukraine needs to follow this event, because we understand that we are at the threshold of the same fight for recognition and acknowledgement of genocide of Russians against Ukrainians, and the world will not always be supporting Ukraine in this case, because if to speak about Bosnia, it is partial support that we can see from the world. It is only about genocide which was committed in Srebrenica. The rest of cases, they were, well, not really disregarded, but they are not recognized, and from the legal perspective, they were not proved. So there will be some legal issues. And also, I would like to ask a question: how Srebrenica and this topic is being studied by NGOs in Bosnia, and how do you work with this subject matter with students, with interns in your center, and what is the engagement of civil society in studying of this problem and bringing up its importance? Thank you.
Question for me, yes. Sorry, it's in translation,
Да.
so it takes a bit
Мгм.
of
Да-да-да.
time to things to settle. I mean, yes, we have a huge actually challenge with when it comes to history education in our country. So to make it, to explain it in the most simplest ways, there are in a way 3 ways you get to study history in Bosnia, depending on where you're born and where you go to school. There is, as you probably know, our country is composed of 2 entities, which we don't have actual border in the country, but it's a sort of a half line, and one is the entity of Republika Srpska, the other is the entity of Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina. This division of the country, in a way, was envisioned by this Dayton Peace Agreement that we signed back in 1995, and it was done in this way because we are a multi-ethnic country, and in this way, each ethnicity is perceived to have sort of its own ground in the country, even though, thankfully, after 1995, we've had many returnees, meaning that people from different ethnicities would come back to their pre-war homes, meaning that we would still be able to, there's a lot of minorities living in both entities of the lines. Now, when it comes to education, that's a very complicated issue because we have, I believe, 12 ministries of education in a country that has less than 4 million people. This is because we're very divided into these different regions. So the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina entity has 10 cantons, and each canton has its own Ministry of Education, meaning that for each of those cantons, and they're very small territories when you look at them in the map, education is governed differently for each canton, then education is governed differently for the Republic of Srpska, and such. And that's a big problem because it's very difficult to do any reform of education when you don't have a state ministry of education to kind of trickle it down. And this means that, for example, when I was growing up, which was in going to school, which was early 2000s, I learned history only until the fall of Berlin Wall. And after that, in my book, it was said that after that, Yugoslavia fell apart. And if you want to know more, you can ask your parents or your community, which is terrible because that's going to be a very subjective way of thinking of history. And each family is going to have their own suffering to tell you, which is relevant, but that's not the whole story for our communities. Secondly, is that some teachers have taken upon themselves to then sort of create or co-create lessons for history. And that is a great effort on the side of the teachers, but then again, we come to the point of vetting. Who says that that program is good? Who says that it's factual? And if we're talking about history, facts are the basis of it. And the third, because again, as I said, we have all these different ministries of education who can kind of guide the educational system, then there are some cantons in which there are some history curricula. As it turns out, many of them are very biased, again, toward one or the other group. And so yes, depending on how you're raised and where you're raised and where luck puts you as a child, that's how you'll learn history. And so that's why as we grew as society, we grew our civil society organizations, and they became in a way a backbone of when young people do want to learn the most factual and unbiased and unhateful narratives of the war, or those that will not perpetuate hate again. They go to civil society, where we try to use facts from the International Criminal Tribunal for former Yugoslavia to present the war crimes and genocide that was perpetrated in the country. On the side of what my organization has done, for example, we've been trying to work with teachers from across different religious and ethnicities. We've created a sort of a teaching manual that focuses more on peace education, because after 30 years of doing this work, you also realize that if you want any sort of results, you also need to compromise. And so we've turned ourselves into finding ways to push into schools peace education, meaning that we will talk to our youth and teach our teachers to talk to our youth about peace and coexistence and fighting discrimination and trying to live in a more accepted society and across the different religions and lines. If anybody is really interested about this type of work, I'll be here for the next 2 days and I'll be happy to share more. So yes, when it comes to education, especially educating about genocide and Srebrenica, it has become, unfortunately, a very contested fact, which is weird to say because facts should not be contested. Right now, the entity of Republika Srpska is very much opposing this resolution that I've told you about, and not just the entity, but also the country of Serbia as well, as they do not recognize genocide in Srebrenica, and or they do not recognize the full scale of it, which is just a very saddening fact. And in this way, and we've talked to some colleagues today, they are also unfortunately supported by Russia and Russian Orthodox Church in this. So the Balkans have their fair share of Russian influence that very much negatively influences our society and development. So thank you.
Так, дякую.
Father Ivan, your question?
I found all the three lectures very, very positive indeed. And but they were all analytical. You did a very good analysis. I was especially impressed by the analytical presentation of Father Yuri Shchurko. But we are running the risk that we are listing all the negative factors, be it of the war, the reaction of the West, but we're not yet, as yet, we haven't yet said much. How are we going to heal these wounds? How are we going to approach our when once this war will be over? How will we challenge the healing of the wounds, not just physical, but psychological? How will concretely we Ukrainians expect to live with Russians? We will not change the geography. The geography is the same. Ukraine is a border country to Russia, just as to Belarus or Poland or Lithuania or the Baltic states. How are we going to get out of this trauma and build a normal, civilized, democratic society? I would like to hear an answer to all these things, to all these questions. Thank you.
Так, давайте ще послухаємо. Можливо, є ще запитання з залу, і тоді будемо
Well,
відповідати
maybe
по
there are
порядку.
some
Там
questions
декілька
from the
питань,
room. We can listen to all of them and then answer all of them together.
Дякую.
Так, дякую. Ігор Шабан,
Thank you,
Греко-католицька
Igor
церква.
Shaban,
В
the
мене
Greek
є два
Catholic Church. I
запитання
have two
і
questions and a comment. The first question is to Father Yuri about the document he mentioned about the Synod of the Greek Catholic Church on the fair peace and the war. We know that the Church says that when you're hit on one cheek, you should turn the other one. And our state, our country is defending itself. So how do our bishops explain this? Maybe you could tell us more about that briefly, of course, because we have many questions. And I also have a question to Goran. You said, you asked us how would we feel in 2050, and this actually shocked me a bit because you are at this stage right now. You have 30 years have already passed for you. It's only a distant future for us. Of course, the technologies are more developed right now, and information sharing is easier right now. But if you have any piece of advice, or maybe there's something that you would like to change or we should change when the war is over, so what would you advise? What should we do? What should we do if we are alive, of course? And a comment on Tatiana's mention of the Srebrenica mothers. I watched movie, but Kwadi Said, a very good film about all the events happening there. It's not a Hollywood quality film, of course, but the emotions and the feelings are so strong there. Thank you. More questions? Yes, I would like to ask. At the time, the border countries the countries bordering with the war, their response to, like Bulgaria, for example, or Hungary, well, did they have any evacuation point? Did they provide any assistance? So what was their reaction in the 1990s and later on? Any other questions from the audience? Or Zoom? In Zoom, you can use the reactions button and raise your hand, and I will give you the floor. Well, I suggest we start answering the question. All right, so let us then start with the question asked by Reverend Dr. Ivan Letsko. So how do we live next to the Russians after the active phase of the hostilities is over and after, well, Russia's failure in the war? I'll try to be brief in answering this question. There's a book by Daniel Philpott, Just Peace, An Ethic of Political Reconciliation. I recommend the book to everyone. It was published by Oxford University Press. Daniel Philpott is the Notre Dame professor, and he was also an intermediary in a conflict in Kashmir and also in Africa. And in his book, he enumerates a number of international practices which could help bring just peace closer. And it includes not only the clear definition of the aggressor and a tribunal, apologies, political apologies, continuing every year so that all generations, like in Germany, reconsider these things. It also includes reparations. It also includes working with the victims. There are many practices which my colleagues can definitely name. I'm sure the world already knows of the precedents of how it could be done, and well, I was more speaking about the reasons for this war and what makes this war more acute, but I'm trying to answer as a person living in the acute phase of war in a country which has not won the war yet. And I was in Kharkiv 2 weeks ago, and then we went to Poltava, which is 180 kilometers from the border, unlike Kharkiv, which is 40 kilometers from the border. But even in Poltava, they had 6 air raid alerts during the day, and they have missile hits very frequently. Those who have come here from the east or the south know what I'm talking about. So the threat is very different there, and people think about different things there. So living here in Lviv, I'm trying to speak less about what we are going to do after the war, but I would like to speak about the fact that if the world does not pay enough attention to this war, nobody will remain here, and there will be nobody to do something after the war. It may be too late. And then answering the question by Reverend Dr. Ihor about the synod, they speak about the fact that we have the right for self-defense. Apparently, Synod pays also attention to Article 51 of the UN, which indicates that each nation has its right for the self-defense in response to unprovoked aggression. And secondly, as Christians, we understand that starting from the Bible, we can say that if somebody sheds human blood, the blood should be shed by a human, because, people were created by God. And we are living in a country well, we didn't have the war here in the West, but we had the war for the last 10 years in the east of our country. So we can't say we were living in a completely peaceful country lately. But we live in this global environment of the post-war Europe, with some exceptions, of course, like Bosnia and Herzegovina and Croatia, where you had horrific experiences of war and murders. In Ukraine, we have been witnessing deaths in the last 10 years, but the rest of Europe has been, well, kind of made very relaxed and sleepy because of the high level of well-being, and they have many pacifist feelings right now. But I would say that if Gandhi and Martin Luther King, very respected persons respected by people of goodwill, if they lived in different historical contexts, if each of them well, tried doing what they did in North Korea or in present-day Russia, they would have disappeared sometime in the night. And well, you know, pacifism is called as naive in the document. Of course, peace is a Christian ideal, but when we speak about just peace, we speak about the restoration of God's order, whereas the victim and the rapist are called what they are. So we are speaking about the God's order where there's no room for evil. And in the beginning of war, this was a collision for many people. And there was a question to the combatants: how can you kill people? How can you live with that? I know that some people had nervous breakdowns because of that. And during one of the roundtable discussions, a very direct question was asked, well, that's how can you kill people? People shouldn't be killed. I said that we are not killing people. We are protecting humans against inhuman beings. We are protecting the loved ones. We are not going somewhere to kill someone. And well, sometimes people ask about, well, turning the other shoulder. Well, you know, this what Jesus says, to eye for eye, tooth for tooth. The principle of proportional responsibility, which appears in the Old Testament in the context of giving the commandments, should have established the law of justice and eliminated the law of jungle. And then Jesus calls upon us to turn the left cheek after we are hit on the right cheek. So he is also calling well, upon resistance, but he's just trying to do that in a more civilized way. Because if somebody is hit into the right cheek, that means that, well, that was something that was done to the slaves or women or children, people who had no rights in the ancient world. So we are talking here about the arrogant attitude to the dignity of other people. And Jesus says, turn your left cheek there. So, which means let them hit you as an equal. So Jesus is not talking about submission here, because in his word, he himself used the military images of a king who well, needs to calculate what to do if somebody well, starts a war against them. And well, when we speak about military, so it's not about leaving their service. And the Paul who wanted to live his life in Christ, so Christ was very important in his, but he writes that when they wanted to kill him, he was given guards, and he didn't refuse from that. He didn't say, just kill me, I don't need any guards. So in the early church, nobody was looking for a death. And when a person well, had this choice either to choose faith or refuse from that, then they stayed faithful. So when we speak about the early church, people whose example of love was an example, a model for the community of the faithful, became the martyrs or the saints, just as Saint George, for example, or many others. So today we understand that on the one hand, one extreme is the pacifism which is not deprived of certain idealism. It has been a part of human nature for centuries, and every time when a bigger threat appeared, like nuclear catastrophe or something like that, we always thought about that. But we understand that what we call this legal defense after the Second Vatican Council, well, because before that there was the concept of this just war, for defense not to turn into violence. This is also not a single way for people. We have what is called in English the just peacemaking theory, where the four big denominations on the American continent back in 1980 started the initiatives publishing certain declarations of theirs, which included 10 steps to just peace, which should have been preventive steps to prevent war. But if the war is going on, as in our case, this fades into the background. And the only question is, do we have the right to defense? Yes, we do. Should we follow whatever we want here? No, we follow the conventions because our goal is just peace and not the extermination of another nation, it's their economy and things like that. Sometimes we feel pain and emotions and rage and we want that to happen, but that's momentary. And that's why we appeal to international organizations. That's why we defend ourselves proportionately as much as it's needed for defense without inflicting harm on civilians. These are things which are obviously present in the international law and the Christian tradition. So today, even protecting ourselves and defending ourselves, we have to understand that we should never become alike with the aggressors. We cannot become animals and lose our dignity. It's very complicated and very painful. It's easy to say about this when I sit here thousands of kilometers away from the front lines, but when people are in a place where all conventions are violated, when the gas is used against them, when the phosphorus bombs are used against them, when civilians go crazy because of the fear they feel, and that's happening in the east and in the south, and it happened in Kyiv. Last year, they had more than 50 attacks per month. So how could people live there? Well, I'm sure they feel it differently. But in the last 2 years, I've been speaking about some things in a very straightforward manner, but I'm sure that we shouldn't keep silent right now. We have to appeal to the international community. We should speak to the leaders of the Christian churches. We should not just be deeply concerned, but they should also help Ukraine not to lose the war. If there is no plan for the failure of this total ultimate evil, what has been there since the October Revolution 100 years ago, if there's no plan like that, it will last for another 100 years. That's why we are calling upon the international community, upon the leaders of the churches to offer a joint and responsible reaction. Our joint efforts and our courage to live by the values on which the so-called Western civilization was built, the Christian values or other values which are called the humanistic values by the non-Christian nations. So I think this is also broadly mentioned in the document which Reverend Father mentioned previously, and they are well grounded there.
I think that, yes, maybe we can hear some feedback from Tatiana and others.
Thank you, Ihor. You are bringing me 20, 30 years ago when that's about mistakes I was talking before, and that's about growth I was talking. I worked with international volunteers. I was leader of the camp during ceasefire in destroyed and divided town. And one very spiritual volunteer came to me one day and she said, like, war is so cruel to nature, to forests. And I was so angry. And I said, what? You're saying it's cruel to trees? She said, yes, look at this nice forest and look at the harm done by war. And I say, who cares about forest, about nature? People are being killed. What are you talking about? So what I'm saying, it took me maybe 10, maybe 15 years to realize what she was telling me. But I could hear that in that moment. Another, let's say, good person, spiritual, a religious person from some other country came to one meeting and he said to us, you know what you need, people? And we said, okay, tell us what we need. You need love. And I said, like, well, you need maybe psychotherapist. Sorry, it's like, I mean, don't tell me about love. So even one documentary I can share with you, but it's on our language. When we gathered 20 years after war on the reconciliation topic, the title of documentary is Don't Tell Me Nonsense About Peace and Love. What I'm saying is different things. One is that I realize that when we had war, options were really narrowed. In war, you have options yes or no, 1 or 2 options, eventually 2.5 options. In peace, you have 25 options, maybe 50 options of any decision in life. And that's huge difference. I worked with war veterans on conflict transformation workshop, leaders of the really kind of tough groups, Hvidra people, war invalids, volunteers of war. And I learned they came back from war and basically they went to war and basically they were in fighting. And fighting is not dialogue. Fighting is, I will probably try to kill you and I will do all my best that you don't kill me. So it's either or. And then they return to their families. And the same model of resolving conflicts they used in families. So first half of the workshop was about, yes, I want to win in every conflict. Yes, of course. And they were all wanted to win in every conflict. And we started to work, but most conflict, we have people who are important to us. In family, on work, with your friends, with your fellow former combatants. I mean, yes, you have conflict with wife, husband, children. Do you really want, if you have son or daughter, do you really want to always be victor in every conflict and that your child is always loser in every conflict? And then say like, oh, I didn't think about it. So that concept of winning in conflict is, I'm talking about daily life. I'm not talking about wars. I try to avoid any geopolitics because I can't influence that, and I need to be informed. But I'm talking about work on grassroots level. If I'm in conflict with Tanya about whatever, and I'm right, and tomorrow I'm right again, and next day I'm again right, what kind of relationship I could expect with Tanya? So what I learned is some basic things. People often ask us how to do peace or what is the science of peace. Well, answer is usually back to basics. 2 important tools is one, ask questions, or at least ask yourself, what are questions in my community or in my society I cannot publicly ask? I teach students on peace studies in Zagreb, and I have feedback from some of them. My father was in war. He's war veteran, but I never spoke with him about war. This is first opportunity on these sessions that we can speak about war. So we have in Croatian society, we had many taboos we don't speak about. And second one is listening. If you start telling me something, I say, yeah, the same was in Croatia and what we did. I'm not listening you. I'm not hearing you. So we need really to practice that. Am I really hearing what are you telling me? And that's what we could do. I was on, I don't know, 2015-16 in Vienna on one round table with some good people from some think tanks from Kiev. And I said, like a good answer is always invest in peace education of young people. We often neglect it because the results are coming in 20 years. But if we do nothing now, in 20 years, we are going to have leaders who know that violence is the only way to resolve conflicts. But if we invest now, and I can tell you, I met many people in Ukraine who are high level, capable, skilled, talented, involved in that field, and I learned from and worked with some of them. That is pure investment in future. This is not decision-making process. It doesn't have any practical power that you will, I don't know, make changes immediately, but it is really investing in next generations. And maybe last thing is very unpleasant one, but I'll tell you our experience, and Katarina mentioned, actually I should say you started first, Katarina. It's issue about war crimes. When it came into, so we had a real fighting in 91, around 92 UN was about to come and first spoke about war crimes done by Croatian army, started, some accusations started. And we had consensus in society, which was spoken openly in parliament. If you defend yourself, you cannot do war crimes, simple as that. So that was 92. After several years, when more and more cases of, let's say, I try to avoid to say my army, but army of my country was doing severe war crimes, then it was like, well, they were individual ones, you know, you can't stop them. And to be honest, I'm kind of peace activist who would tell you every war has it. So I'm not blaming any particular individual. I even upsetted some of my participants from Mostar, young women, when I said, like, we all can do war crimes. I can do war crime. I cannot guarantee I can't. And they said, like, what are you talking? What are you talking about? It's not about bad guys and good guys. It's about war and that horrible things happen in war. What I don't want that my state stands behind war crimes and that they hide people and they change their identities. They invest money. They hide them for a long time. And the real question from your side can be, as it usually comes in such discussions, like, what are you really telling us? Because it happens in every war. Are you telling us don't do bad things? I'm not telling any kind of ethical lecture now. It's not about ethics at this moment. It always is about ethics. But when I talk with some kind of military personnel, I say, good commander want to protect soldiers from doing war crimes because it makes very bad negative impact on them and community when they return back. If you know that I was in army, and if you hear that I killed some children, all of you are going to make decision, am I going to ask Goran about it or be silent? In most cases, you will be silent. So with my pure presence, I could silence 100 people immediately. And can you imagine living 30 years in such kind of society when people know that these people are raped, these people did this and that? We are forced to live in societies where basically we are legitimizing the most horrible crimes. And it is preventing society to blossom. It's preventing any kind of prosperity in society. So when I said in one occasion, I said, it's protection of soldiers. It's like if you go to Chernobyl and there is radiation. I studied physics, so I like nuclear stuff. If you want to protect yourself, you give them protection. So basically, Geneva Convention is protection for your soldiers. that they will not commit suicide tomorrow when they return to their families, that they can walk in their villages or towns freely, and that not other people will avoid them. And I'm just not talking that civilians are hurt. Civilians are hurt by bomb or by accident or whatever, but intentionally armies are doing horrible things. And I spoke with these people and I worked with them, and it's a long story, but it is bad for the communities. It is bad for society on long run. Maybe it's good in 1 year or 2 years. I'm not kind of here pretending I have answers, but we are really entrapped, at least in Croatia. I don't want to judge about Bosnia and Serbia, but you can speak. We are imprisoned by that silencing culture.
Yeah, thank you. As I've been also hearing a lot from colleagues and taking all your questions in consideration, 3 things came to mind: accountability, forgiveness, and future. And I'll try to reflect a little bit on all of them in trying at least to answer the questions of how to build and live after war, and what happens when these horrific crimes are finally done, and how to live side by side your neighbors who you cannot change. First, accountability, and that is something that I don't think I can tell you how to do it. In many different post-conflict societies, it's seen differently. In our Yugoslav one, it was envisioned mostly through criminal prosecution and justice, and that's because that's what we as society were used to from Yugoslav times and such. Meaning, very simplistically, somebody kills somebody, they go to court, they get their sentence, they serve their sentence. That was our way of finding justice and giving accountability, taking accountability for the crimes. We've not done it in a perfect way at all, and that's why probably we're here today talking about the challenges that we still face, and we've not finished the process of accountability. For other societies, it was through truth commissions. It was through owning freely up to the crimes individuals have committed without the fear of persecution, and accepting them as a society, for example, in South Africa, and going through a process of acceptance and forgiveness. And that's why forgiveness is another part that I believe it's important, because it has to be the base of rebuilding or building trust. And living side by side your neighbors. Again, we have not done it perfectly, but in civil society at least, and through this peace building work, we've tried. And that also comes in several forms, because it also means that each of us individually had to come to terms with the history of our family, the history of our community, the history of what was done in the name of whichever ethnic and religious group we come from, and the same way we forgive our ethnic group for doing it, we forgive the other ethnic groups or religious groups for doing it. And the second one is future, and in this I can't not mention again Mothers of Srebrenica and the sort of the ideology that they work with, and the thing that they are most proud of is that they've been able to raise children, sometimes their own children, or children who were left without, whose parents were killed during the war. So they were able to help them, stipend them, school them. And the most proud of what they are of is that they were able to raise children who do not and did not have a need for revenge. And if I can leave you with one thing at the end, however you want to, maybe it's idealistic, this peace building world and the work that we do, but do have in mind that an eye for an eye only leaves the world blind. So thank you.
Thank you, all the participants. And a comment from me, I absolutely agree with Corin and with Diana that this is not eye for eye. We are not that kind of society. Ukrainian society was not brought up that way, and we do not bring up our children in this way, following the principle of an eye for eye. And maybe we have some other questions. If you have any questions, you can use this feature in Zoom with reactions. I think that, yes, Lavko has a question, and also those who are present physically, if you have any questions, please make sure to raise your hand. There will be an assistant with a microphone, and it will be possible for you to raise a question. Yes, I would like to welcome everyone. This is not a question, but we heard a lot about just peace. And if to speak about the formula of Ukrainian president, and we know that some 80 countries of the world joined this. And what about this formula in Ukraine? Do we, of course, we have different diplomats and different politicians who make their statements, but what about the opinion of the church about the formula of peace by Zelensky? Those 10 items, is that enough? Does it suffice, or it has to be complemented by something? But because, as we know, next month the leaders of the world will have a meeting in Switzerland, and there will be a very important meeting dedicated to discussing of the formula. What about the vision of the church, the peace formula? Is there anything to be added, or maybe the way it is enough? And also there is another thing which I find concerning. It is this idea that we talk a lot about, well, this solidarity or togetherness, but I think that we need another important thing. If to speak about Croatia, everyone was together, and I think this is good, but we need something extra, some extra power to liberate Ukraine. And we don't really need to be sad, because this is what you mentioned in the beginning, aggression. You know, the Russian aggression, if to speak about former Yugoslavia, it was different. There was one state to be eliminated, more republics, more peoples. It's different. But here we have aggression of one state against an independent state, another state. That is why I think that if to speak about this peace formula which is suggested by the president, this is from the position of a victim. So let's speak about just methods. I'm not sure whether I was clear enough in expressing myself. I think that, yes, this is the question probably addressed to Father. Well, I cannot speak on behalf of the president of Ukraine, or that is obvious, but speaking seriously, as I already stated, just peace is the peace which reflects the order of God, when we have respect to all the parties and all individuals. And Ukrainian people elected Mr. Zelensky as president, so he has the trust of Ukrainians to rule in this country. And those steps that he suggests, for these tactical steps, let's call them that way, whether they are sufficient, well, probably there is a lot to be added here, but together with his team, he, as a politician who has consultations with international experts as well, they opted for the most essential thing, which in view of his team have to be carried out for Ukraine to reach peace. What is supported by the society? Because, of course, I'm not an expert in all of those tactical steps. because well, the Zelensky team, they are more aware of everything, but the people of Ukraine, they do not support appeasement. For us, just peace is also not about this minimal peace. So the invaders are here, let's have a frozen conflict here in this territory to prevent other people from, to prevent other sufferings. And listening to what we hear from people and different public polls, the majority of people agree with the statement presented in the international arena by the president, and the tactical steps could be different. And I think that they know better what is the best, what is the first thing to do, and it is supported by the society on the whole.
If I may just settle a little factual score when talking about Western Balkans and the experience of former Yugoslav countries. It is a little bit, I don't want to sound like a teacher, but a little bit incorrect to call the war crimes and genocide that was perpetrated in former Yugoslav countries as just a war or just a civil war that didn't have aggression. I'm going to just mention a few facts and you can kind of decide on yourself. But at that time called Republic of Bosnia and Herzegovina, from 1992 to 1995 was very much under aggression by Republic of Serbia. My country and Croatia, my country at the time also had embargo on weapons, so we were not able to defend ourselves. I don't like talking as we because I was just being born at the time, so that's why I use my country and Bosnians rather than myself. My people do know what aggression is, and especially the Bosnian Muslims, in majority of this of the victims and survivors I talk about, were in a very unequal position to other ethnic groups, and that is why we do have convictions of genocide. That is why there are certain judgments that also very much talk about aggression, and the siege of Sarajevo that lasted for over 1,400, well, technically, correctly, 1,425 days. So after all that, we have been able to build, preserve a sort of a peace. You can call it positive, negative, stable, unstable. And we have been able to live for 30 years now as an independent country that did survive aggression and that did survive genocide. So that is the experiences that we do talk from. So it is not as easy to just say civil war, because it wasn't. So that's just to settle a little factual score. And also I want to make sure we do have interpreters, so we're talking in many languages, so maybe there was that issue too. I'm not saying that to correct people per se, but just to settle a bit of a factual score as to where we're coming from, the experiences that we're sharing, that our people do know the type of fight, and that they were in a very unprivileged position because for many years, the same European Union, Europe, did not see the suffering of people in Bosnia and didn't do much to stop the Sarajevo siege, sieges of different cities in Bosnia, and the aggression, and did not support us at all in any way, but we persevered. Thank either God, well, thank our people for this. So please, I think there were more questions. Thank you.
Yes, maybe we have some questions from the audience. Yes, are you ready with the question? Yes, we have a question here. I am Sergei Yushchik, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. I would like to address my question to Goran. So in the beginning, I will start briefly with the question and then I will elaborate upon it. First of all, thank you for this statement of yours that if it seems to everyone that everything is great and there are no conflict, it means that there are some problems in this society, in fact, because this is what you mentioned in your statement. That is why my question is as follows. Is it possible to treat, and how much time is it going to treat the lack of trust? And I will explain it that the first thing which dies in war is truth and trust. This is what dies first. And in Ukraine, we have occupied territories. They were occupied in 2-3 days, and physically, people didn't get a chance to get evacuated or to respond to the occupation. And in 12 months, in about 6 months, it depends. Very many people has a certain kind of attitude towards these people in occupied territories as potential collaborators. That is the first thing. And there is another situation in 2 years of war and stress in our Ukrainian society. There is a popular trend that I think that my neighbor, if an enemy comes, that my neighbor would collaborate with an enemy. And this idea, this is just an assumption, but it evolves because, well, these people, they were born in times of Soviet Union, so probably they would collaborate with an enemy. These people, they have different religious practices, so it is my assumption that they could be collaborators. And this lack of trust to your neighbor, if you speak about this very grassroots level, the same street, or even in regional media, we can really see these messages. So is it possible to treat this level of trust? Because with the war, it's clear you have an enemy and you have ours, but what about this lack of mistrust? Well, it's been 30 years with you. So is it possible to put it right, to fix this situation? Yes, thank you. And I think that there is another question from Ihor, and then we will hear an answer. Yes, first of all, I would like to express gratitude for having me. And it's great to be a participant at this conference. And I have a question. Taking into consideration the context of this panel and drawing on experience of the Balkan states. Of course, we have heard that the situation is not ideal. However, the war in Bosnia was finished thanks to the political will and intervention of the West and Billy McClayton and the US, namely. And it is understood that even in 30 years, well, almost 30 years, there are many problems in Bosnia, discord in society, all of that. Yes, we heard you, but the most important thing is that people are not killing each other. That the same can be mentioned about interventions in Kosovo. I have the following question. What could be the role of church? What could be the role of civil society in affecting this collective West right now, which is very reactive? So they continue playing black figures. This is what we heard today, and we understand that we can really feel part of this community on the one hand, but can best support Ukraine as part of this collective West. And the most recent events was Israel. That was a joint blow, and there was this explanation for Ukraine that Ukraine cannot expect this level of support? So this is my question. What does it take for us to get real support? And what does it take for all of us? What do we have to do for the collective West to stop being afraid of Russia? Thank you. Thank you for this question. And there is another question from the audience, and I think that we can proceed with questions. Yes, I would like to welcome everyone. I am Nazar Kohut, and I have a question to Oran and Tanya. So, what about the end of war? What was the economic situation, and how did it work when the war ended with economy, and when did foreign investors started working in your countries? Thank you for your question. Horan, we'll start with you, I guess. Yeah, so there was this question about this trauma, like a domestic trauma.
Question of trust comes often in any kind of peace gathering. Sorry. The question of trust comes regularly. In our culture, and probably here, but in our culture definitely, there is that concept that someone needs to earn trust. You know, if I'm in conflict or dispute with Tanya and I don't want to talk with her, and you ask me why you don't speak with her, because she didn't do something, she didn't apologize or she didn't repair damage or whatever. And whenever I work with whoever in my region, that's kind of normal. That's how it should be. But I disagree with that, because I'm the one who gives trust to Tanya. I decide how much I am going to trust to her. The less confident I am, the more hurt I am, the less successful I am dealing with my wounds, I would blame her for everything she did. And my advice even to my children is, trust as much as you are ready to lose. And often people call us either that we are budale, which means idiots, or too naive. It's like really derogative, you know, like you trust them too much. It is my choice. It is my choice, and I take a risk. And people ask me, you are so naive in your peace work, and then people kind of take advantage. Yes, but that is my choice. And the number of situations when someone takes advantage of me is maybe 10%. 90% is that if I trust Tanya after what conflict we had, I'm just making up the story, that maybe she starts looking at me differently. And then we are starting slowly to build something fragile, but build again. So when I talk with Croatian war veterans, they have mantra, Serbs need to apologize first. Second, they need to pay for our war damage. After that, we will start considering, are we going to talk with them or not? And then I tell them, okay, but basically you are telling me you have no power. It's up to Serbs what will happen, not up to you. So basically you are completely hopeless. You just say, you need to do something and then I will do something. Basically, you are saying you will do nothing for ages, whatever. You are saying that your children will not talk with anyone. So I would just say, let's be careful about where the trust comes. If you watch any film or speak with anyone, well, we are different kind of people, so probably we don't speak with people who are professional, what's the English word, prevaranti, cons, or taking advantage. You know, these people who are selling you something and then take all your money and they go away. All their philosophy is on that they earn your trust. They slowly earn, and then say, oh, suddenly I need, I don't know, million grivnia. Could you borrow me that money? And he said, yeah, you're a good man. I know, I trust you. I give you million grivnia, and you never see that person. So be careful about earning trust, but be more focused on, I am strong enough to stand if you will, let's say, betray me again. But when you betray me second time, that they say, don't do it 3 times. So I'd say, let's invest in that. About role of the church, I learned from my friends theologists that church is not just officials, not only clergy, that church is consisting of all the believers. In that sense, I would say church is extremely powerful. I was asked by my student, what is the role of the churches or religion? Basically, that was a rhetoric question, because in our region, it's not seen as very positive in terms of peace. And my response is some of the best peace building, some of the greatest work in peace work is coming from the religious background. And we learn from them. Amra, my friend, wrote a book, Islam and Nonviolence. I learned from people, from top-level people from Eastern Mennonite University or from Notre Dame Catholic University in US or others. So I would say, yes, church definitely can do a lot. Absolutely, a lot. About economy, I wouldn't. I would maybe just say in simple words. So you may say, is that enough or not? The very big disappointment with war veterans is that they were for year, 2 years, 3 years on the front line. They came back and they didn't have job. Their company doesn't exist anymore. And then another Goran, let's say, bought their company, and I'm party man. And you spent 3 years fighting for independent Croatia. And then say, where you were, Goran? Well, I was in Munich or somewhere else, but I came and bought your company in meantime. And basically, we are reaching to point, and I'm talking about our region, reaching to point that all these wars were really just to get the economy in the hands of the private or international entrepreneurs. And it's really sad, because I know these people, it's like, is that why I'm 90% invalid, And that person looks really, let's say, healthy, because invalidity is coming in mental issues or maybe internal damages, whatever, cannot sleep, cannot live normally, and say that's why I give my health, that someone just took my job in that sense. So it's always issue, if you are fighting, be sure you are fighting for something, and we are all in that.
In terms of trust building, if I may, and the role of religion in it, maybe. I don't know why, but it came to my mind, the sort of, what did you say, maybe saying, and maybe that, I do believe that could be a starting ground for building that communal trust again, is the notion of the one who is without sin, let them throw the first rock. I think it resonates a lot in bringing people to this equal or equitable place of trust building, and for the Bosnian society, religion as a whole did not have so many great examples during the war. Unfortunately, it was very politicized. We've had even as we had even evidence in the courts where we've had, in this case, the Serbian Orthodox Church sending paychecks and money to people who are now war criminals and who've been convicted of war crimes. And there are these very distinct, unfortunately, relations. So that left a very tough mark on then using religion after the war for peace, which is a sad notion because all religions in its essence are peaceful. What we have seen is exactly in this grassroots level, and especially when it comes to working with victims and survivors, and in this case also especially working with women survivors of the war and women survivors of sexual violence in conflict, where we've had great initiatives of all clergy, meaning the Orthodox, Catholic, and Muslim priests having special prayers and days of and sort of sermons talking to their clergy about the importance of this communal acceptance, accountability of women survivors of sexual violence, because at least in our society, which is still a very patriarchal society, sometimes women who survived sexual violence were seen as now dirty women, and or they were sometimes also then refused by their husbands or chased out by their families after they spoke about their experiences, which is a horrible thing to bear. And so we did see really great examples in that, and then religious leaders and churches supporting the women going through these process. But then again, we should ask ourselves, how do we even come to the point of that? When it comes to the end of war and economy situation, unfortunately, yes, I have to agree with basically everything that Goran has said. Only in Bosnia it comes in three. Because we do have our society and our constitution basically divides us into three main ethnic groups. So Serbs, Bosniaks, and Croats. And so all this multiplied by three, depending on which ethnic group you're at. Right now, we're dealing with very high levels of corruption and nepotism. In the country, we have one of the highest youth unemployment rates in the world, and by some approximations, at any point between 50 and 60% of our young people are unemployed. A big majority of them leaving, and the newest trend that we do also see is not just young people leaving, but the whole families leaving the country. It can be traced back to many reasons, but mostly it is this, and Goran was mentioning at the beginning, this lack of respect of your own society toward you. And then I would add, going kind of backward, lack of trust of our individuals to our society. That this is the society that we should be investing in. Yeah, that's a little bit again from the Bosnian context. And please, yes.
A very short comment about the reaction of Western leaders towards the situation with Israel and why no one is going to protect Ukraine in this way. I think it hurt everyone to hear Borrell's voice. I think that this is political rhetoric, and this is what Timothy Snyder calls moral weakness. This explanation that missiles, they had to cross French, American bases, that's why they had to down them. I think this is just a political twist, and this is about moral weakness, not taking accountability, because these were the people who are so focused on welfare, and it doesn't hurt them because they've never had this experience. And it's such a bad idea to divide this pain into the pain which really hurts and the lesser pain, and just because some country geographically is left at its disposal and is actually doomed to barely surviving in order to protect itself. I think that yes, it definitely hurts immensely, And I don't really know what we have to do in this situation. I think that the president recently speaks very straightforwardly. Those people who are used to diplomatic narrative, I think they're really surprised to hear that. But when you close ones die, and he is the person who knows a lot about the current situation and also those threats posed to us. That is why I think that this, what we heard from the president, is something that many of us hold in our hearts. I guess that we really need to start protesting democratically, for those countries to understand that these are not just politicians urging to stop this war. It's very important for us to be able to defend ourselves. This is what Herzog mentions. Everyone speaks a lot about us not losing, but there is no plan for this defeat of the country, which had its experience after World War II. And historically, we know that this cleansing of the country is very important, not only for the state, but it is needed for the whole international community. And it is a challenge. The international community has to accept this challenge, or we will just continue surviving attacked by this dragon. That is why I think that yes, there is this discussion about revolutions, about Maidans, and it was a trigger of societal change back in the past. But I think that it is us protesting not against somebody, because it is the way that some people thought before. We were always protesting because we wanted to have something, for something. That is why we really need to urge a wider community, and we really need to enlist their support, because we don't have means to defend ourselves. I think it goes without saying what the situation is right now. Thank you. We've had an extremely fruitful discussion. We have heard different opinions. We heard answers to the questions that we really need to think over, to contemplate on them. It is important for us to have very many questions to ourselves, what it is that we want to invest into future generations now. But let's not forget that learning the experience of, well, in this case, post-Yugoslav countries, we also have our own situation and history, and very often it is perceived by the world as something local, though it is not local. And I think it is very important for the world to be absolutely aware of that. And this perception is important for Ukraine, but also it is very important to remember that these are only Ukrainians who do a lot. We will keep studying it. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. I think that it's time for us to sum up. Thank you, Katerina, for helping us with facilitation of this panel. I'd like to express gratitude to Goran, Tatiana, to Father Yuri for their statements, for extremely interesting discussions that we've had. So our conference is not over, because today is day one only. Tomorrow we will continue. We will start at 9:30 tomorrow, and we will have two different parts. We will focus on building a just peace and the role of the churches and civil society. We will also be speaking about reconciliation from the perspective of time, lessons for Ukraine. For those who will listen to us online, make sure that you save the Zoom link. Please use the same link to join in for day two of the conference. I would like to express gratitude to everyone who was present here, and also to our online participants. I also would like to express gratitude to everyone who's defending our state right now, and they make it possible for us to hold these conferences. I would like to wish all of you a peaceful, calm evening. Well, the way it could be, of course, in times of war. We will see each other tomorrow. Thank you.